Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you live. We're in Chapter 4 of the Biology 1 textbook, and it's entitled Parts of a Plant. In this chapter, we're going to cover several things. We're going to talk about the importance of plants, how they live, the parts of a plant, the roots, the stems, the flowers. Now, why are plants important? What is so necessary to have plants? Well, very important that plants provide oxygen and use up carbon dioxide. We talked about photosynthesis in the last chapter. Carbon dioxide and chlorophyll in sunlight produces oxygen and produces sugars for the plant to live and oxygen for us to breathe. Plants provide materials for clothing. We have a cotton plant, cotton ball on the left-hand side, and some of the cotton fabrics that can be made from the cotton. Plants provide building materials. Logging is important, and they cut the trees down and make boards of various sizes and shapes and use them to build houses. Plants provide shade, pretty important in the summertime, and particularly in hot areas of the country or the world. You can sit under a tree and get some shade and cool off and just relax and enjoy life. Plants provide food, very important. Provide various fruits, apples, cherries, pears, all kinds of fruits. Provide vegetables, lettuce, tomatoes, carrots, you name it. And it provides grains. It provides the wheat that we use to make bread and things like that. So plants are very important as a food source. Plants provide medicines. Some of the important medicines that we use were first discovered in plants. Quinine, for example, was used to treat malaria, and quinine was discovered in the cinchona plant. Aspirin, everybody takes aspirin for a headache or an achy muscle. Aspirin was discovered in willow bark. Now, today we make it chemically, but we didn't know about aspirin until we studied the properties of willow bark. And there's still a great deal of research going on in materials that are in plants that might be useful for curing disease. Parts of a plant. All plants have the same basic parts. We have roots, stems, and leaves. Now, some plants have a fourth part. They have flowers, but not all plants have flowers. The roots are in the ground, and they bring in water and nutrients from the soil. The leaves and stems are above the ground, so they get their nutrients from the air, the carbon dioxide that they use to make oxygen and sugars. These parts are called organs. Each part is made of a special tissue, and each part has a specific job to do in the life plant. The roots firmly anchor the plant to the soil. If you've ever had to go out and pull grass or weeds, you know how firmly some of these things will be in the soil. They're very hard to pull out. They provide water and mineral to the plants. They pick up water from the soil, they pick up minerals from the soil, and they move them into the plant so the plant can have something to use. They store starch, and that's kind of important so the plant can grow. Some roots have a central taproot, other roots are fibrous. And here we have a taproot. This is a picture of a taproot, and then a dandelion taproot, a long central root that goes down to the ground. You can see how hard it is to pull up a dandelion by the length of the root. And then other roots are fibrous. They have a lot of stringy fibers on them. This is a strawberry root, and you see all of the little strands of roots that grow out from the plant itself. The stem has a xylem and phloem and other parts, epidermis, cortex, pith, cambium, and the stem is very important for moving materials in and out of the plant. The epidermis provides protection from insects, from fungi, and it prevents water loss. The epidermis is thick and heavy, and water can't evaporate from it. and the fungi and the insects really can't bite through it very well. The cortex stores sugars and proteins, and it makes a lot of chemicals that the plant needs for living. So it stores things that it needs and it makes other things. The cambium helps in plant growth, and the pith, the soft spongy cells that store and transport nutrients. So the pith keeps nutrients available and moves them around different parts of the plant. The xylem and phloem are a system of tubes, and the tubes move up and down the plant. The xylem moves water and minerals throughout the plant from the roots. Every year the xylem dies and you get new xylem formed next year. So this is why you get the tree rings that you can count and see the growth of the plant, because every year you get a new ring. Now the xylem moves materials from the ground up. The phloem moves materials from the leaves to other parts of the plant. So they kind of work in opposite directions. The phloem are alive all year round, and they keep things functioning even in the wintertime. And if you get tree sap, areas of the country where you can get sap to make maple syrup or maple sugar, the tree sap comes from those phloem tubes. Flower, not all plants have flowers, but the plants that have flowers are pretty important. Have several parts. The pollen is needed to form a new plant. The pollen spreads out and helps fertilize things and develops a new plant from that. The stamen produces the pollen grains, so the stamen produces the pollen that can then be sent out. The carpel catches the pollen and moves it to the ovary. So the stamen produces pollen grains. The pollen is formed. It blows through the air. In our part of the country in the spring, pollen is everywhere. You get this yellow powder that's on everything. But that's the pollen being produced, moved to another plant, catches it by the carpel and moves it to the ovary. And then the ovary contains an egg that will combine with the pollen to form a seed. And so new plants can spread out that way. We're not going to say much about the seed in this chapter. This is a shot of some of the different kinds of seeds that plants produce. But we'll talk about the seed in chapter 5. We see a lot of the sort of flat brown leaf looking seeds in our part of the country in the spring, because we have a lot of trees that put these things out. So, in summary, roots are very important because they anchor the plant, they hold it into the ground, and they provide water and minerals for the plant. They bring materials up from the ground. The stem has several important functions. The epidermis prevents water loss, blocks attack by different little critters. The cortex stores sugars and proteins and makes a lot of needed chemicals for the plant to function. Cambium helps in plant growth, and the pith stores and transports nutrients. So all of these have storage functions, they have protection functions, they have movement of materials throughout the plant kinds of functions. The xylem and phloem are counterparts of one another. Xylem moves water and minerals from the roots up through the plant. So they go from the ground and up. And they die every year, and they are responsible for the tree rings. The phloem moves materials down. It moves materials from the leaves into the stems and into the other parts of the plant. And the phloem survives throughout the year. Pollen needed to form a new plant. The stamen produces the pollen grains. The carpel catches the pollen and moves it to the ovary. And the ovary contains the egg that will combine with the pollen to form a seed. So we have a cycle here that goes on. And then the seed is planted, we get a new plant, and the process starts all over again. So, thank you very much for attending, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.